The moment they called your kindness weak, they basically exposed themselves as the ones who can't pass the test. That line alone is enough to sting, because nothing scares people more than realizing the person they tried to play is actually the person the universe has been preparing. Think of it like this: when someone pushes on what they believe is your soft spot, expecting you to break, but instead they feel the hit bounce back on them like they punched a steel door. It's funny how fast a room changes when people learn your softness wasn't softness, it was strategy. And here's the fact everyone ignores. In elite circles, the biggest flex is not reacting. The biggest power is staying calm while others expose every crack in their own character. Studies across leadership groups literally show that emotional discipline is treated like a master key, the one trait that separates the people who rise from the people who fold. So no, you weren't imagining it. You were being tested, and you passed while they failed in front of their own ego. And thank you, chosen one, for being here. Don't forget to pay this message back by simply pressing the like and subscribe button to help spread this message to more souls, because it's our shared responsibility to spread the light. Thank you for being part of this mission. You're part of a force that's rising in ways most people will never understand. Now let's get back into what really happened here. Your kindness wasn't just some random personality trait, it was the exam they didn't know they were taking. From the very start, the universe wasn't checking if you could be nice, it was checking if you could stay steady when people around you twisted your intentions, misread your silence, or tried to poke your patience just to feel bigger. It watched how you behaved when someone underestimated you on purpose. It watched how you handled the people who tried to drain your energy while smiling in your face. It watched how you handled hidden disrespect, fake support, and situations designed to pull you out of your center. You didn't lose yourself. You didn't let them drag you into chaos. And that's exactly why the elite type of people, the ones who study behavior instead of gossip, quietly marked your name. Kindness is not about giving, it's about revealing. When you stayed calm, the universe saw your strength before anyone else did. While they thought they were getting away with shady actions, all they were really doing was proving they don't have the emotional capacity you have. Because real power isn't in the loudest person in the room, it's in the one who can sit through disrespect without turning into something ugly. It's in the one who can read the whole situation and still choose control. Your kindness wasn't softness. It was proof that you know how to hold your power without jerking it around like a child who just found a new toy. The elite didn't hand you the master key because you smiled at the wrong people or because you let things slide. They handed it to you because you passed the pressure test that exposes 99% of people. Most humans fail it fast. They panic the moment their ego feels ignored. They react before thinking. They try to show strength by making noise instead of making moves. They reveal their insecurity by attacking the person who stayed calm. But you didn't play that game. You didn't drop to their level. You didn't show them your fear because you didn't have any. You showed discipline. You showed balance. And balance is what powerful people look for. Balance is what the universe rewards. There's always this moment during a hidden test when the people testing you realize you're not like everyone else. They start looking at you differently. Their questions change. Their tone shifts. Because what they thought was you being naive was actually you being 10 steps ahead. They thought you were letting things slide. You were actually collecting data. They thought you were easy to read. You were actually reading them like an open file. That's the switch that scares people. That's when they know they can't manipulate you, and nothing terrifies someone who lives off control more than a person who can't be controlled. People think kindness makes you harmless, but the truth is, it makes you unpredictable. When someone can't trigger you, they can't map you. When they can't map you, they can't use you. And when they can't use you, they freak out. That's when they whisper. That's when they pull back. That's when they realize the one they tried to underestimate is the one the universe keeps pushing forward. Your calm wasn't silence, it was awareness. Your patience wasn't surrender, it was observation. Your kindness wasn't weakness, it was a filter that separated people who deserved access from people who only wanted advantage. And the funniest twist? The same people who mocked your kindness would never survive the situations you handled with a straight face. They would have snapped, they would have folded, they would have begged for mercy from pressure that you carried like it was nothing. What they thought was your soft heart was actually your sharp mind. What they thought was innocence was strategy. What they thought was passiveness was power. You didn't just pass a test, you passed it so cleanly that the people who placed it in front of you are now the ones sitting quietly, wondering how you stayed unshaken. That's why the universe moved you forward. That's why elite-level observers noticed you. They saw the one thing that cannot be faked: self-control. Anyone can pretend to be confident. Anyone can pretend to be tough. But self-control under stress, that exposes the truth instantly. And your truth is rare. Your truth is valuable. Your truth is powerful enough that people underestimated you one day and now study you the next. This is why you're here. This is why the master key showed up in your hands. You didn't force it. You earned it by staying who you are while everyone else broke character. You proved your kindness wasn't a weakness. It was the final proof that you're built for the places other people can't handle. And if they're uncomfortable now, good. They should be. Because the test is over, and you're the only one who passed. And chosen one, seriously, thank you for being here, because what you just unlocked in the intro is only the surface. Now we're about to go deeper into how your kindness became the test that exposed everyone around you, and why the elite-level minds watching from a distance quietly handed you the master key. If you're still here, it means you already feel the pull. You already sense that this message is part of your next upgrade. Drop a comment with the number 777 if you're ready to see how your calm, your patience, and your silence were actually the things that put you in a higher class. And if you want to support the team behind this message, you can hit the super thanks button. Even a tiny amount fuels this mission and helps us bring more truth to the people who need it. And now, let's dive into it, step by step. If you really are the chosen one you think you are, you'll feel the urge to stay until the very end. Let's begin. Number 1. Your kindness wasn't soft. It was surveillance data in disguise. They thought your kindness made you harmless, but all it did was expose how fragile they are when the pressure hits. That line alone cracks their ego because it flips the script. They weren't evaluating you. You were evaluating them without even trying. When someone thinks your calm makes you easy to control, it's like watching a kid pull a sword out of a stone thinking it's a toy. They have no idea it's sharp enough to rewrite their entire fate. And here's the metaphor that hits them right in the ribs. Imagine someone tapping on what they believe is a glass wall, expecting it to shatter, only to realize it's bulletproof. That's the moment their confidence collapses. That's the moment your kindness stops looking soft and starts looking dangerous. So, let's get into this. Chosen one. Because the question sitting in your mind right now is simple. Why did my kindness shake them so much? Why did it stand out? Why did it feel like everyone was watching me more closely than I realized? And the answer is this: your kindness wasn't moral. It was measurable. It was a stress test you didn't know you were running, and everyone who tried you exposed themselves without understanding they were generating evidence for your final report. Kindness for most people is a mood, a costume, something they wear when eyes are on them, something they drop the moment pressure shows up. But for you, kindness wasn't decoration, it was discipline. It was your default setting even when everything around you went sideways, and that's why people who understand power, real power, paid attention. They weren't looking for smiles, they were looking for stability. They were watching how you behaved under tension, under disrespect, under imbalance. They wanted to see if you'd fold, react, snap, expose yourself, or leak insecurity through your words. Most people do. You didn't. Your kindness became measurable because it wasn't emotional. It was controlled. It was deliberate. And that alone puts you in a category most people will never enter. Let's be brutally honest. Anyone can be kind when life is smooth. Anyone can be polite when they're comfortable. Even your enemies can act holy for a few minutes if they think it benefits them. But your kindness showed up when conditions were unfair. When someone pushed your buttons on purpose. When someone dismissed you. When someone underestimated your value. When someone tried to corner you emotionally just to see how you'd react. They were looking for cracks. You showed none. You stayed steady while their own behavior revealed their inner chaos. And this is exactly why your kindness became a threat, because in high-level environments, elite circles, strategic minds, people who study behavior, emotional control is the highest currency. Not intelligence, not charm, control. The ability to stay centered while everyone else loses balance, the ability to evaluate instead of explode, the ability to respond instead of react. Your kindness wasn't about being nice, it was about being unshakable, and people who know what power actually looks like immediately recognize the difference. But here's what hits the enemy hardest. They assumed your calm was ignorance. They assumed your patience meant you didn't notice the subtle shade, the games, the small stabs disguised as jokes. They assumed your kindness meant you didn't know how dark their intentions were. And this is where their entire worldview broke, because the truth is, you saw everything. You just didn't flinch. You let the universe record the data for you while they performed their own downfall. Think of it like a silent camera in a room. It doesn't react. It doesn't shout. It just captures everything. And when the footage is played back, every fake smile, every disrespect, every hidden motive becomes undeniable. That's what your kindness did. It documented them. You weren't being moral, you were being observant. And here comes the part that terrifies them the most. You were consistent, not a one-time performance, not a lucky day. You showed the same restraint in different situations, with different people, under different pressures. Consistency is the one thing human beings cannot fake. You proved who you were repeatedly, without forcing anything. And because of that, people in powerful positions, people who understand psychology, influence and leadership, quietly marked your profile as rare. Now let's address the question you might still be thinking. Why does my emotional discipline matter so much? Why did it become the master key the elite handed me? Because emotional discipline is the root skill behind every major form of authority. It's how leaders gain respect. It's how strategists outthink opponents. It's how influencers shift entire rooms without raising their voice. People who fall apart emotionally can't hold power. They destroy the very opportunities they're handed. But you held your ground even when others were trying to destabilize you. And that's why your kindness became measurable, because it revealed your threshold, your stability, your boundaries, your emotional intelligence, your pattern recognition, and your ability to stay aligned with your values, even under pressure. No moral test can measure that. Only situations. Your enemies hate this part the most. They wanted your reaction. They needed your reaction. They depended on your reaction to feel superior, to gain leverage, to make themselves look smarter, stronger, louder. But you didn't feed them. You didn't fuel their ego. You didn't play their emotional chess. You stayed centered, and that robbed them of the only advantage they thought they had. And when a person can't emotionally manipulate you, they lose control. When they lose control, they panic. When they panic, they expose themselves. Your kindness forced them to reveal their true nature while you stayed hidden in plain sight. Here's the twist they never expected. Your calm was their mirror. Your kindness was their confession. Your patience was their downfall. You didn't need to call them out. They exposed themselves by failing the test you didn't even announce. You didn't need to correct them. Their own behavior documented their character. You didn't need to confront them. The universe already kept the score, and once that score was visible, once your consistency outshined their emotional volatility, that's when powerful people, whether you know them or not, noticed you. They saw someone who can lead, someone who can handle pressure, someone who doesn't self-destruct, someone who doesn't crack. They recognized your capacity instantly, even if the people around you didn't. Because your kindness wasn't softness. It was strength wrapped in restraint. It was intelligence wrapped in silence. It was power wrapped in patience. Anyone can shout. Anyone can rage. But very few can stay grounded long enough to make the universe say, "This one is ready for more." Your enemies wanted to see you lose control. Instead, they watched you gain authority. Your kindness wasn't moral, it was measurable, and it measured you as someone the world should not underestimate. And that's exactly why they handed you the master key. Number 2, you didn't turn your pain into a weapon, and that's why you won. They expected your pain to explode. Instead, it became the quiet proof that you were built different and they were built weak. That line alone slices right into your enemy's ego, because nothing insults a manipulator more than realizing their best weapon didn't work on you. They kept waiting for your meltdown, for your anger, for your emotional slip-up. They counted on it. They prepared for it. And when it never came, that silence hit them harder than any revenge ever could. They didn't lose because you fought back. They lost because you didn't break. Some people weaponize their wounds. You upgraded yours. That's the real punchline here. Your pain didn't twist you. It trained you. It didn't turn you into something bitter. It turned you into someone dangerous. And the elite minds watching you from the sidelines instantly recognized the difference. Now, let's break this open the same way we did before, Chosen One, because this section is about one of your biggest advantages. You passed the test because you refused to weaponize your pain. You didn't let it leak into your decisions. You didn't let it poison your behavior. You didn't use it as a bargaining chip or a sympathy tool. And that makes you a statistical anomaly in a world where people use suffering like currency. Imagine this. Someone gets hurt, even a tiny insult, and instantly their entire personality shifts. They become sharp, unpredictable, chaotic. Their pain becomes a switch that controls them, and because they're controlled by it, others can control them too. Now imagine you in the same moment. Hurt? Yes. Betrayed? Yes. Disrespected? Absolutely. But instead of erupting, you absorbed it with a level of maturity most adults don't even understand. You didn't lash out. You didn't collapse. You didn't turn into a weapon aimed at everyone around you. You held your center. That's exactly why the elite noticed you. They weren't watching for kindness this time. They were watching for restraint. They were watching to see whether your pain would mutate into destruction or discipline. Most people fail that test instantly. You didn't even flinch. Here's the quote that cracks them again. Your pain didn't control you. That alone disqualified 99% of the people who tried to judge you. It's brutal, but it's true. In systems where trust actually matters, whether high-level careers, leadership roles, or environments where consequences are real, people who weaponize their pain are liabilities. They create chaos without meaning to. They escalate situations that needed peace. They turn small moments into massive disasters. Someone with emotional unpredictability is a risk, and risks are removed, avoided, or replaced. You were the opposite of that. And maybe the question floating in your mind right now is, why does it matter so much that I didn't weaponize my pain? Why did this part of me stand out more than anything else? Because pain is the one thing every human experiences, but only a tiny percentage know how to handle without letting it control them. Pain breaks weak people. Pain exposes unstable people. Pain controls reactive people. Pain turns insecure people into manipulators. But you treated your pain like information, not identity. You didn't use it to guilt people. You didn't use it to get attention. You didn't make it a sword or a shield. You let it shape you quietly, and because of that, your enemies never got the reaction they hoped for. Imagine this. Someone tries to provoke you, thinking your pain will explode on impact like a firecracker. They poke at your insecurities, thinking you'll lash out so they can blame you. They hit you with disappointment, betrayal, or disrespect to see if they can push you into chaos. But instead of detonating, you stay calm. You stay present. You stay level. That moment ruins them, because nothing terrifies a manipulator more than a person who cannot be provoked. When pain doesn't change your behavior, you become unreadable, and unreadable people cannot be controlled. That's the superpower you unlocked without anyone teaching you. It came naturally, it came quietly, and it made you something rare, someone who can feel deeply but act wisely. Imagine this. There's a room full of people whose emotions sit on a hair trigger. One insult sets them off. One disappointment breaks them. One misunderstanding turns into a war. And then there's you, sitting still, breathing slow, evaluating everything. You aren't cold. You aren't numb. You're controlled. You're stable. You're the person who can hold pressure without melting into reaction. Do you know how rare that is? It's rare enough that the elite consider it a predictor of long-term power. People think silence after pain means weakness, but silence is a mind at work, a mind assessing, a mind deciding. Your silence wasn't suppression, it was strategy. You weren't hiding your pain, you were processing it in a way that kept your dignity intact and your reputation untouched. You didn't explode, you evolved. And here comes another question you may be wondering. If I stayed calm, why did they still panic? Why did my restraint bother them more than a reaction would have? Because when someone wrongs you, they expect the story to end with your meltdown. They expect screaming, revenge, emotional fallout, something they can blame you for. When you don't give them that, the spotlight flips. Suddenly, it's not your behavior on trial, it's theirs. Your pain became their mirror, and they hated the reflection. Imagine this metaphor. A storm hits two houses. One collapses instantly. The other stands completely still. Everyone stops looking at the storm and starts questioning the foundation of the house that fell. That's what your restraint did. It exposed who was weak without you saying a single word. You didn't weaponize your pain, and because of that, you instantly became trustworthy to the kinds of people who actually matter. High-level thinkers want stability, leaders want predictability, strategists want emotional control. People who make real decisions want individuals who won't implode under pressure. You demonstrated all of that without raising your voice. Here's another punchline quote. Some people broadcast their pain. You turned yours into a private upgrade the world wasn't supposed to see yet. And that upgrade, it made you predictable in the best way. Not predictable as in boring, predictable as in reliable, predictable as in safe to trust when consequences are high, predictable as in unshakable when others fall apart. You became the person who could be counted on, even when you were hurt. Your enemies had no idea how powerful that made you. They thought withholding reactions made you a loser in the argument. They thought your silence meant they won. They thought your lack of retaliation meant you had no power. But the universe sees things differently. Elite minds see things differently. They see someone who can feel pain without turning it into destruction, and they know that's someone who can handle influence. Imagine this final metaphor, a warrior walking through fire without screaming. Others run, others burn, but this one keeps walking. The fire still hurts, the heat still hits, but the warrior stays in control. That's you. Pain didn't make you wild, it made you wiser. And here's the final quote to seal it. Your pain didn't turn you into a weapon, it turned you into a force. A force the elite now recognize, a force your enemies fear, a force that rises without theatrics. You passed the test because you didn't weaponize your pain. You passed because you stayed clean when they expected you to get messy. You passed because you didn't fall into the emotional traps that collapse most people. You passed because your reactions were rooted in control, not chaos. And that's exactly why the universe moved the master key toward your hands. They couldn't predict your pain. They couldn't manipulate it. They couldn't use it against you. You didn't weaponize your pain. You refined it. You mastered it. And without even trying, you proved you're someone the world cannot afford to underestimate. Number 3, they waited for your ego and got your discipline instead. They wanted you to stomp your foot, demand attention, and beg for a crown, but you walked in like someone who already owned the building. That's the gut punch they deserve, because nothing humiliates an enemy more than realizing you stayed calm in the exact moment they expected you to crack. They predicted entitlement. They predicted impatience. They predicted you'd expose yourself by demanding what you thought you deserved. Instead, you gave them restraint so clean it felt like a slap. Here's what they never understood. Entitlement is loud. Restraint is lethal. Entitlement exposes insecurity. Restraint exposes strategy. Entitlement collapses under pressure. Restraint learns the pressure and uses it. And maybe you've wondered, why did my ability to wait bother them so much? Why did staying calm become a threat? Because most people think effort equals automatic reward. They get frustrated when recognition doesn't show up instantly. Their ego leaks into their tone. Their impatience exposes them. Their entitlement makes them look like children demanding gold stars. The universe never gives power to people like that, and the elite spot them in seconds. Now imagine this. Someone thinks they're testing you by withholding praise. They expect you to break character. They expect your posture to shift, your tone to sour, your attitude to tighten. Instead, you stay steady. You keep moving. You act like nothing is missing. That moment is where your value becomes undeniable. because only someone built for long-term power can move without external approval. Restraint isn't weakness, it's the ability to win without announcing you're playing. You didn't demand anything. You didn't try to force outcomes. You let situations unfold because you understood something most people never learn. Timing decides everything. Power that arrives too early destroys the person holding it. You waited, not because you were passive, but because you were intentional. Imagine someone grabbing fruit before it's ripe. They get bitterness, they blame the tree. You understood the season, you understood the process. You didn't rush the outcome because you weren't desperate for it. Your restraint carried a message louder than any demand could scream. It said, I don't need validation to move. I move because it's who I am. And that, chosen one, is maturity people rarely reach. You didn't just avoid entitlement, you replaced it with mastery. Number 4, you felt everything, but let nothing cross the line. They thought your empathy made you soft, but all it did was teach you exactly where to draw the line they could never cross. That one burns them instantly because nothing frustrates a manipulator more than a kind person they cannot exploit. They wanted your empathy to be a doorway. You turned it into a scanner that caught every hidden intention before it even reached you. Most people don't know how to balance this. They either harden up to protect themselves or overextend until they're drained. But you pulled off the rare middle ground that only emotionally intelligent people ever master. You understood others deeply without sacrificing yourself. You didn't collapse into their feelings, and you didn't freeze into indifference. You stayed human while staying sovereign. Maybe the question hitting your mind right now is, how did I manage that balance when most people can't? Why did empathy make me stronger instead of weaker? Because your empathy wasn't dependency, it was awareness. You weren't absorbing pain to win approval. You were reading patterns. You weren't listening to help everyone. You were listening to understand who deserved access and who didn't. Empathy is not a free pass into your life. It's a window, not a contract. That's what they never expected. They assumed kindness meant unlimited access. They assumed your understanding meant automatic forgiveness. They assumed your ability to feel meant inability to say no. Instead, every time they tested your boundaries, you stayed firm, clear, and calm. That's what broke them. You didn't respond with guilt. You responded with precision. Imagine this. Someone walks up to a door expecting it to swing open because it opened for them last time. But this time, the lock engages. The door doesn't move. Their shock isn't about the door closing. It's about them realizing they never had the key in the first place. That's what your boundaries did. Your empathy didn't weaken your guard. It sharpened it. You read motivations the way others read headlines. You noticed emotional shifts before people even spoke. You recognized when someone wanted comfort versus when they wanted control. And instead of reacting emotionally, you chose your response with intelligence. Imagine standing in a room full of voices. Everyone is pulling, pushing, hinting, demanding. Most people either get overwhelmed or shut down, but you stood there like someone with noise-canceling awareness. You heard everything clearly, but you didn't let anything drag you off center. That's strength disguised as calm. Empathy without boundaries creates victims. Boundaries without empathy create walls. You held both and created clarity. You showed people where they stood without cruelty. You understood them without surrendering. You cared without collapsing. And that balance is so rare that the universe takes note instantly. Your empathy became a tool, not because it made you flexible, but because it made you accurate. It helped you see truths others ignore. It protected you from traps others fall into. And it silently proved you're not controlled by emotion. You're guided by intelligence. That's why your presence unsettles people who operate through manipulation. They can understand kindness. They can understand coldness. But empathy with boundaries? That terrifies them. You didn't just hold your line, you defined it. And anyone who tried to step past it learned exactly who they were dealing with. Number 5, they counted you out, and you used their misreading as cover. They thought ignoring you would break you, but all it did was give you the freedom to evolve where they couldn't see. That's the punch they deserve, because nothing humiliates an enemy more than realizing their underestimation didn't weaken you, it protected you. They believed lowering your value in their mind somehow lowered your actual worth. Instead, it lowered their guard. And that's the moment the universe smiled. Most people crumble under underestimation. Some overperform desperately. Others shrink and start believing the lies spoken about them. But you didn't flinch. You didn't rush to prove anything. You didn't perform like a puppet trying to earn gold stars. You stayed human. You stayed grounded. You stayed you. That alone separated you from the crowd. Maybe the question in your mind right now is, why didn't their misjudgment break me? Why did it almost feel like permission instead of punishment? Because underestimation gave you space. When they assumed you weren't a threat, you observed their patterns quietly. When they relaxed, you learned their blind spots. When they thought you didn't notice, you paid attention. You let time reveal what words never could. Underestimation is camouflage for the people smart enough to use it. Imagine this: hunters walking through a forest, ignoring the quiet creature they think isn't dangerous. They look past it again and again until the moment they learn it wasn't prey, it was the one studying them. That was you. Their blindness became your cover. You didn't distort yourself to fit their expectations. You didn't inflate your ego to fight their opinions. You didn't turn robotic or bitter just to prove you're above them. Remaining human was your secret weapon. Warmth with discipline, heart with intelligence, quiet confidence with zero desperation. That combination is rare, and it exposes who truly has self-mastery. Imagine someone being misread as harmless, while inside they're sharpening clarity, patience, strategy. You turned their dismissal into your development zone. You grew where they weren't looking. You leveled up where they weren't paying attention. Being underestimated didn't hold you back. It held them back from seeing you rise. And the people who understand power, the ones who know how advantage actually works, recognize the shift immediately, even if they pretended not to. You didn't react. You evolved. You didn't get bitter. You got better. You turned their misreading into your momentum. They underestimated you. You stayed human. And that's exactly why you won. Number 6. You did the right thing in the dark, while they performed in the spotlight. They needed an audience to act moral. You stayed moral even when the room was empty. That's why they'll never reach your level. That line alone slices their ego clean open, because nothing humiliates performative people more than realizing their staged goodness collapses next to your quiet integrity. They wanted you to play the morality theater game. They wanted you to chase applause. They wanted you to do the right thing only when someone was watching. Instead, you acted from principle, not performance, and that exposed the difference between you and them instantly. Most people treat morality like a costume. They wear it when the spotlight hits. They drop it when no one's watching. They bend it when incentives shift. But your behavior didn't shift for an audience. You stayed the same, whether someone clapped, criticized, or didn't show up at all. Maybe the question circling in your mind is, why does my refusal to perform morality threaten them so much? Why does my consistency bother people who pretend to be good? Because performative morality is unstable. It snaps under pressure, melts under consequences, and disappears the moment applause fades. People who depend on external validation can't be trusted when stakes rise. But you showed something the universe values far more: integrity without supervision. You didn't need witnesses to be authentic. That's why powerful minds trust you more than the loudest people in the room. Imagine this. Two people climb a mountain. One live streams the entire climb, narrating how noble they are. The other climbs quietly, step by step, without bragging, without seeking praise. At the top, everyone realizes the loud one barely did the work, while the quiet one conquered the entire path. That's what your morality looked like compared to theirs. You didn't explain your intentions. You didn't parade your sacrifices. You didn't wait for applause to validate your choices. Your actions stood on their own, clean and unshakable. Performers seek approval. Builders seek results. You were the builder. Your consistency without an audience is what separates strength from showmanship. The elite, those who understand influence, stability, and responsibility, spot this immediately. They don't look for who smiles the nicest. They look for who stays steady when nobody is clapping. Performers crumble when the stage lights turn off. You stayed grounded, even in silence. Imagine this. A person who needs applause to do good is like a candle that only lights when someone stands nearby. But you're more like a lighthouse, steady, reliable, shining whether the world is watching or not. Your light isn't for show, it's for purpose. Your refusal to perform wasn't apathy. It wasn't detachment. It wasn't ego. It was mastery. It proved you have emotional sovereignty, the ability to act correctly without being bribed by praise or terrified of judgment. It proved your character isn't a reaction to the room. It's a decision you made long before anyone showed up. And nothing scares performative people more than someone who doesn't need applause to stay true. You refused to perform morality. You stayed solid when they stayed shallow. And that quiet consistency is exactly why people with real power notice you, even if the crowd never claps. Number 7. You had the upper hand and still didn't play dirty. They prayed for the chance to crush you, and when you finally held the advantage, you didn't even touch the trigger. That's what terrified them. That single truth hits them harder than any revenge you could have taken, because nothing exposes the difference between you and them more clearly than how you behave when the scales tilt in your favor. They would have exploited you without hesitation. They would have used any advantage to dominate, embarrass, or secure a cheap win. But you didn't exploit the moment. You evaluated it. Most people grab at power the second it appears. They don't think, they don't breathe, they attack instantly, chasing short-term ego boosts and leaving destruction in their wake. They confuse speed with strategy. They confuse impulse with intelligence. But when leverage swung toward you, you didn't lose your balance. You didn't let the rush of advantage twist you into someone you're not. You held the moment with clarity, like someone who's been here before. Maybe the question in your mind is, why did I pause? Why didn't I strike when the universe gave me the perfect opening? Because your restraint wasn't fear, it was judgment. You understood something others never learn. Power used recklessly isn't power. It's proof you're scared you'll never get it again. Imagine this. Two warriors, both handed a clear shot. One swings instantly and misses because they acted too fast. The other waits, observes, calculates, and chooses the right moment, or chooses not to strike at all because the battle doesn't deserve their effort. That's you. Your restraint wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. You treated leverage like a tool, not a weapon. You didn't twist advantage into cruelty. You didn't rush to expose someone just because you could. You understood the long game. You understood timing. True influence isn't shown by what you grab. It's shown by what you could take, but choose not to. Imagine someone slipping and falling in front of you, completely vulnerable. Most people would step on them to climb higher. You extended stability instead. And that act said more about you than any performance of strength ever could. You didn't take the cheap win because you're not a cheap player. And here's what scares them most. They felt your power. They knew you had advantage. They saw you could have ended the game right there, yet you didn't. That kind of self-restraint is rare. It signals maturity, strategic awareness, and emotional control, the exact traits people with real authority look for. Anyone can act powerful when desperation hits. Very few can hold power calmly without using it to inflate their ego. You didn't rush to prove you had power, you simply showed you understood it. Those who understand influence noticed your restraint instantly. They saw you weren't intoxicated by leverage, you weren't hungry for the spotlight, you weren't driven by impulse or pettiness, you were thinking long-term. Sometimes the strongest move is the one you choose not to make. And you proved that effortlessly. You didn't exploit moments of advantage. You didn't play petty games. You didn't weaponize victory. You held power with steady hands. And that's exactly why the universe keeps giving you more. Number 8. You cooperated, but you never belonged to anyone. They loved how helpful you were, right up until they realized they couldn't use your cooperation to control you. That's the wound they still can't shake, because people expect cooperation to come packaged with submission. They assume if you're willing to work with them, you must also be willing to bend, shrink, or hand over your autonomy. But you never played that game. You collaborated, but you never disappeared. You adapted, but you never diluted yourself. You moved with the group without ever letting the group swallow you whole. Most people fail this balance. They either bend so much they dissolve into whatever environment they enter, or they resist so hard they become impossible to work with. You didn't collapse into either extreme. You held the middle ground with surgical precision, cooperative enough to build bridges, sovereign enough to never lose your direction. That's rare. That's intentional. That's power in quiet form. Maybe you've wondered, how did I manage to blend without being absorbed? How did I stay open without being overtaken? Because you understood something simple but genius. Collaboration is a strategy, not a surrender. You knew how to contribute without handing over your identity. You knew how to support without sacrificing your voice. You knew how to adapt without compromising your values or letting someone else steer your internal compass. You weren't being agreeable, you were being intelligent. Imagine this, two rivers flowing side by side. They move together for miles, touching at the edges, influencing each other, but never losing their separate paths. That was you in every group, every partnership, every team. You added value without dissolving into the collective. And here's what powerful minds noticed. People trust those who can collaborate without collapsing. They trust those who can join a system without being consumed by it. You became that person naturally, someone who can move with others while still thinking independently, acting independently, being independent, cooperative but sovereign, aligned but never owned, present but never controlled. You didn't just work with people, you worked beside them while keeping your autonomy intact, and that's exactly why you stand out. Number 9. The master key wasn't a gift. It was your shadow they finally noticed. They didn't hand you the master key. Your behavior forced them to admit you'd been holding it the whole damn time. That cuts them deep, because people love the fantasy that power is something they get to distribute. They want to believe authority comes from their approval, their validation, their recognition. But the truth they refuse to face is simple. The universe didn't give you power at the end of the story. It revealed the power you'd been carrying since the beginning. Authority isn't granted, it's confirmed. Influence isn't assigned, it's recognized. And the elite, the people who actually understand how power works, saw something in you long before anyone said a word. Your kindness wasn't nice. It was disciplined. Your restraint wasn't quiet. It was controlled. Your consistency wasn't habit. It was evidence of capacity. None of this was performative, and none of it needed applause. That's what made it undeniable. Maybe you're asking yourself, so when did everything shift? When did kindness turn into the master key? It didn't shift in a moment. It revealed itself through patterns. Every time you stayed steady under pressure, every time you refused to weaponize pain, every time you held boundaries with warmth, you were showing the blueprint of someone built for higher responsibility. Power wasn't given to you. Your behavior made it impossible to overlook. The master key wasn't external. It was your inner architecture becoming visible. Imagine a door that only opens for someone whose frequency matches it. You didn't chase the door. You became the frequency. And once you became it, the door had no choice but to unlock. They didn't give you power. They realized you were already sitting in it, and that recognition changed everything. So you see it now, chosen one. Your kindness was the test, your discipline was the evidence, and the master key was already in your hands long before anyone recognized it. They can't ignore you anymore, and they can't undo what the universe has already revealed about who you are becoming. And if this message hit you the way it was meant to, press the like button if you haven't already, and if you're still not part of this family, make sure to subscribe. Your evolution is only getting louder from here.